Back to the Future wasn't just a movie. It was a moment in pop culture history. The time-traveling DeLorean, the wild-haired Doc, and Marty McFly's skateboard skills? Iconic. It became a massive hit, won hearts across the world, and still plays on TV decades later. But even a classic like this had its slip-ups, and there's one scene people still talk about, not because of the story, but because of a blooper you were never supposed to see. Surprisingly, there's more than one. Join us as we take a closer look at the bloopers and the secrets that almost slipped past everyone's eyes. A movie that traveled through time and straight into history. Back to the Future came out in 1985. It was a science fiction movie, but not the usual kind. It had time travel, yes, but it also had humor, drama, and heart. Directed by Robert Zemeckis and written by Zemeckis and Bob Gale, the film quickly became one of the biggest hits of the decade. Michael J. Fox played the main role, Marty McFly, a teenage boy who ends up in the past by mistake. He rides in a time-traveling DeLorean car, made by his odd but lovable friend Doc Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd. The trouble starts when Marty meets his young parents and accidentally stops them from falling in love. If he can't fix it, he might disappear forever. The idea for Back to the Future was first created in 1980. Zemeckis and Gale had already worked together before, but they hadn't made a big hit. They needed something big, and this was it. But at first, nobody wanted it. Over 40 studios turned it down. Why? It wasn't raunchy enough. At the time, comedies were full of adult jokes. This one was cleaner, more fun for everyone. Things changed after Zemeckis directed Romancing the Stone. Suddenly, Universal Pictures was interested. Casting wasn't easy either. The team wanted Michael J. Fox to play Marty, but he wasn't available. So they hired Eric Stoltz. But just a few weeks into filming, Zemeckis realized Stoltz wasn't right for the part. He made the bold move to recast Fox. It cost them more money, about $4 million extra, and they had to reshoot scenes, but it was the right call. With Fox in the lead, everything clicked. The movie was filmed in California and wrapped up in April 1985. Then came some exciting test screenings. Audiences loved it so much that the release date was pushed forward to July 3rd, just in time for summer. This created a tight editing schedule, and some special effects weren't fully finished. But that didn't matter. The movie became a huge success. It earned $381.1 million and became the biggest film of 1985. Critics praised it, fans adored it, and even the theme song, The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News, became a hit. Years later, Back to the Future is still loved. In fact, in 2007, the U.S. Library of Congress selected it for preservation. It wasn't just a movie. It became a cultural moment. And like many great films, the magic didn't just happen in front of the camera. Behind the scenes, things were just as interesting. Crispin Glover, a face you recognize. Most fans remember George McFly, Marty's awkward but lovable father. In the first movie, he was played by Crispin Glover. But when the second movie came around, something strange happened. Glover didn't come back, but George McFly still appeared. How? Instead of simply casting a new actor and moving on, the filmmakers used a mold of Glover's face that had been made during the first film. They used it to create prosthetics and put them on a different actor, Jeffrey Weissman. From far away, it looked like Glover, but it wasn't. And that became a serious problem. Crispin Glover was not happy. He didn't mind that someone else played the role. What bothered him was that they used his face, his likeness, without asking him. He later explained, had they only hired another actor, which is kind of what I thought had happened, that would have been totally legal, and I would have been completely fine with that. Because they used the mold of his face without permission, Glover took legal action. He sued. The case was eventually settled, but it raised important questions about how an actor's image can be used. Something that's even more important now with the rise of AI and deepfakes. It wasn't just a behind-the-scenes disagreement. It was a major Hollywood moment that changed the way contracts were written and how faces could be used. Michael J. Fox was always learning and forgetting. Playing Marty McFly wasn't easy. The character wasn't just funny and cool, he was also super talented. In 3 films, Marty learned to ride a skateboard like a pro, play guitar on stage, shoot a gun, and even ride a horse in the Old West. But here's something many people don't know. Michael J. Fox actually learned all those things for real. Fox took his role seriously. He didn't want to fake it. He wanted to look like someone who really knew what he was doing. That meant learning one new skill after another. As he put it, "It seems like I was always in school. Someone was teaching me something. I'd accomplish one thing. I'd figure out the guitar part, or I figured out how to skateboard, or I'd figure out how to ride a horse, or I'd figure out how to shoot a gun. There's always something." He laughed and added, "I learned about 1,000,000 different skills, and I've forgotten them all." That quote says a lot. It shows his dedication, but also how fast-paced filming was. One moment, he was mastering a guitar solo. The next, he was on a horse. And though he may have forgotten those skills now, you wouldn't know it by watching the movies. He made it all look natural, like Marty really could do it all. The music, the moves, and a blooper you might have missed. One of the most unforgettable scenes in the first movie is Marty playing Johnny B. Goode at the school dance. The crowd goes wild, and Marty goes even wilder, jumping, sliding, and tearing it up on stage. It's a fan favorite. But did you know Michael J. Fox actually learned the guitar solo note for note? He already knew how to play guitar from his teenage years, but this was different. He wanted it to look perfect. The music had already been recorded. Fox worked with a teacher named Paul Hansen. They broke down the song piece by piece. That way, when Fox played it on screen, every finger movement matched the sound. He even worked with a choreographer to plan the dance moves. He wanted to copy the style of famous rock stars from the past. And it worked. You can feel the energy in every second of that scene. Now, here's where it gets even more technical. Later in the series, Marty interacts with himself as different versions in different times. That meant the camera had to capture 2 versions of Fox in the same frame, often talking to each other. But regular cameras couldn't do that without looking fake. So director Robert Zemeckis came up with a solution. He asked ILM to build a special camera called the VistaGlide. It was a robotic, motion-controlled camera that allowed for perfect shots. As Zemeckis explained, we needed to come up with a system where I can do these splits, where I can put 2 actors in the same frame and be able to move the camera. It worked so well that those scenes still hold up today. But even with all that high-level planning, not every scene was perfect. One moment in particular made it into the final cut, and it wasn't edited. It was a blooper, a small mistake, but once you spot it, you won't unsee it. And the fact that it slipped through editing makes it even more fun to discover. Because no matter how big the budget or how talented the team, sometimes little things sneak past everyone's eyes. And those little things, they often become fan favorites. Speaking of which, Back to the Future is filled with great lines. But one joke stands out for how it connects the past with the present. When the president became the punchline. When Marty McFly tells Doc Brown that Ronald Reagan is president in 1985, Doc reacts with shock and disbelief. He shouts, "The actor?" For viewers today, this might seem like just a funny line, but back then, it was also a clever nod to Reagan's real-life past as a movie star. He had acted in many films from the late 1930s to the early 1960s before entering politics. You'd think a politician might be upset about being laughed at in a movie, but Reagan actually loved the joke. He liked it so much that he asked his projectionist to rewind and play it again. That's how much it entertained him. Reagan was also a fan of the entire movie. In fact, he quoted it during his 1986 State of the Union address, saying, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." That line was from Doc Brown in the film. It's rare for a president to joke about himself like that. It showed how powerful and fun the movie had become. Even presidents were quoting it. But while Reagan enjoyed the humor, some moments in the film were a little more serious for the actors involved behind the scenes when Marty was someone else. We all know Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly, but what many people don't know is that he wasn't the first actor to play the part. Even though Fox was the original choice for the role, the people in charge of his TV show, Family Ties, said he couldn't work on both projects, so Eric Stoltz was hired instead. The film crew even started filming with Stoltz, but something didn't feel right. Director Robert Zemeckis didn't think he fit the role the way they imagined. While they worked to get Fox back, they continued shooting with Stoltz. When Fox was finally given the chance to read the script, he was thrilled. He said, "This is the best script I've ever read in my life." He loved the story and agreed to do the movie, even if it meant working long hours on both the film and his sitcom. But what's surprising is that not all of Stoltz's work was erased. There's still a part of him left in the movie. In the diner scene where Marty punches Biff, something seems different. The lighting is off, and Biff looks a little more fresh-faced. Actor Thomas F. Wilson, who played Biff, even admitted, "It's my belief that Eric Stoltz's fist punches me in the 50s cafe." It's a small detail, but for fans who look closely, it's a cool reminder of the version of the movie that almost was. And Eric Stoltz wasn't the only one showing off new skills. Some of the cast did their own stunts, and did them well, learning ropes, riding horses, and getting the kiss. In Back to the Future, Part 3, we see the characters travel to the Wild West. The movie added a new feel to the story, with horses, old towns, and Western fights. In this part of the trilogy, Thomas F. Wilson played Buford Mad Dog Tannen, a rough cowboy, and the ancestor of Biff. He didn't just play the part, he lived it. Wilson actually learned how to ride a horse and throw a lasso himself. According to writer Bob Gale, Tom Wilson spent hours and hours learning how to ride and throw that lariat. It's him doing it. That makes the action scenes even more fun to watch because, you know, it's really him doing it all. But the surprises don't stop there. Christopher Lloyd, who played Von Doc Brown, had his own big moment in Part 3. This time, the focus was more on him than on Marty. In the past, we had seen Doc as a wild genius, but in this movie, we saw a softer side. He falls in love with Clara, a kind school teacher, and when they kiss, it's not just a sweet moment in the story, it's also Christopher Lloyd's first kiss ever on screen. That's right, as Bob Gale said, never been kissed on screen in a movie before. It added something new to Doc Brown's character. The creators wanted to explore his world this time, not just Marty's. They gave us something unexpected, a love story, and it worked. But not every scene was romantic or smooth. Some brought tension behind the scenes. When the dog disappeared and tensions exploded, Doc Brown's dog Einstein played a big role in the time travel test. But what viewers saw as a cool experiment, test audiences took very differently. When Einstein was put inside the DeLorean and disappeared, many people watching thought the dog had been killed. They didn't know it was a time machine yet, and they hadn't seen any trailers or posters. According to Bob Gale, there was a nervous hush came across the audience because they thought we killed that dog. It shows how powerful the film's opening scenes were, and how little information people had going in. Luckily, viewers soon realized that Einstein was just fine and had simply traveled through time. Still, it's a reminder of how stories can surprise people when they're fresh. But not all surprises were written in the script. Some came from arguments during filming. Crispin Glover, who played George McFly, was known for his strong ideas about how his character should behave. During one scene, he wanted to use a broomstick, but director Robert Zemeckis didn't agree. The argument got so loud that other actors hid in their dressing rooms. Michael J. Fox said, "I poked my head out of the dressing room, and Chris Lloyd poked his head out, and we looked at one another and were like, thank God that was nothing to do with us." Glover's passion for the role was clear. even if it led to clashes. These moments show how much energy, debate, and emotion went into making the film, and it's part of why Back to the Future still feels alive today, because every scene, every detail, and every behind-the-scenes moment added something real. Strange choices, missed moments, and a close call. Back to the Future. Part 2 picks up exactly where the first film ended. Doc shows up and tells Marty and his girlfriend they need to head to the future to help their kids. But the time travel doesn't stop there. Marty ends up going back to the 1950s again to stop the older version of Biff from giving his younger self a sports almanac. That book would let him win bets and change the timeline completely. But this wasn't the original plan for the sequel. Writer Bob Gale explained that in the early version of the script, they had planned to visit the 1960s instead. He said, "We had them going to 1967 or 68. Lorraine is a flower child and ends up going to jail. We thought it would be fun seeing Doc Brown smoking dope." But director Robert Zemeckis had a different idea. Instead of going somewhere new, why not go back to the first movie? This way, the audience could see the events from a new point of view. It had never been done before, so the second movie became something totally fresh by using the scenes from the original in a new way. But not everyone was happy with how the first movie ended. Crispin Glover, who played Marty's dad George, had some issues with the message of the film. In the end of the first movie, Marty returns to a better version of his life. His family is richer, his parents are happier, and even the car is nicer. Glover didn't like that. He told director Robert Zemeckis, "I thought it was not a good idea for our characters to have a monetary reward. The love should be the reward." He believed the film was saying that money equals happiness, and he disagreed with that message. This disagreement was part of the reason Glover didn't return for Part 2. Another reason was that he was offered much less money than other actors like Leah Thompson and Thomas F. Wilson. Glover said it just wasn't fair. Even though he wanted to come back, the pay gap and creative differences kept him away. But while some actors walked away, others needed a little push to say yes. Mary Steenburgen joined the third film as Clara, Doc Brown's love interest. She brought warmth and kindness to the role. Bob Gale said that Mary wasn't sure at first, but her kids loved the first two movies and begged her to do it. Gale explained, "She says it was her kids that said, 'Oh, Mom, you gotta be in a Back to the Future movie.'" After meeting the team, Steenburgen agreed to take the role. Her chemistry with Christopher Lloyd made the love story feel real. But filming that part wasn't always easy. In one scene, Marty is hanged by Mad Dog Tannen. It was meant to be a stunt, but something went wrong. Michael J. Fox later wrote in his book, Lucky Man, that the rope started cutting off his air. He said, "I swung unconscious at the end of the rope for several seconds. Thankfully, the team noticed just in time, and he wasn't seriously hurt. Still, it was a scary moment, but close calls weren't just on camera. Even casting decisions had big what-ifs. The doc we almost got and more bloopers. Christopher Lloyd became iconic as Doc Brown, but he wasn't the only actor considered for the part. Writer Bob Gale shared that another big name was almost cast, Jeff Goldblum. Gale said, "The only other guy we really seriously considered for Doc Brown was Jeff Goldblum." While they also talked about John Lithgow, Gale clearly remembered meeting Goldblum. In the end, they picked Lloyd, and he became unforgettable in the role. But even with the perfect casting, not every moment in the film was perfect. Some bloopers still made it into the final cut. One of the biggest bloopers happens when Marty shows the 1955 Doc a video recording from 1985. In the video, Doc says, "Never mind that now, never mind that now." But when Marty was filming it earlier, the camera was down by his side and not recording. Still, when we see the video later, it includes that exact line. Another blooper happens in the Save the Clock Tower scene. In the background, the same man is seen walking around the corner twice in the same direction. It's a small mistake, but fans with sharp eyes noticed it. Then there's the flyer itself. When Marty shows it to Doc, it sometimes looks brand new, and other times it looks wrinkled. The appearance of the flyer keeps changing between shots. Another funny blooper shows up in the video recording scene again. In the original recording, right after Doc says 1.21 gigawatts, Marty starts talking about plutonium. But when the 1955 Doc watches the tape, the Doc in the video is still talking. When 1955 Doc reacts with, "What did I just say?" The timing is completely off. And if you look even closer at the Save the Clock Tower flyer that the lady gives to Marty, you'll notice something odd. Jennifer writes a note on the back of the flyer later in the movie. But when the flyer is first handed to Marty, the writing is already there. These little mistakes don't ruin the movie, but they're fun to spot once you know what to look for. It shows that even the best films can have small errors, and that sometimes those errors become part of the charm. Continuity errors, background extras, repeating actions, props changing between shots. All these little things remind us that no film is perfect. But it's those imperfections that sometimes make it even more loved. Because behind the magic, it's still made by people. Factual flaws that slipped through time. One of the early scenes in Back to the Future shows Marty about to play guitar through Doc's giant amplifier. He switches on the amp, turns all the knobs to maximum, plugs the cable into the amp, and then into the guitar. As any guitar player knows, this would have caused a loud pop or blast the moment the cable touched the guitar. That should have been the moment the amp exploded. In real life, guitarists plug in both ends before turning on the amp to avoid this, but the film gets it backward. Another error happens when Doc sets the time machine to December 25th, 0000, to go see the birth of Christ. First, historians believe Jesus was likely born in 4 or 6 BC, not year 0. Second, there is no year 0000 in the calendar system. It jumps from 1 BC to 1 AD, and even if the year were correct, the DeLorean would have landed in California, not near Bethlehem. But Robert Zemeckis later said that this was actually a joke. Still, the line makes little sense when you think about it. There's also the moment when Doc loads the DeLorean with plutonium. He uses a glass tube filled with red liquid. In reality, plutonium is a metal that looks silver or gray. It's not a red liquid at all. Real plutonium turns brown or black when it touches air and flakes apart. Another factual issue happens during a simple TV reference. Marty tells someone in 1955 that he saw an episode of The Honeymooners called The Man from Space on November 5th. But that episode didn't air on that date. It actually aired in December. The episode that aired on November 5th was The Sleepwalker. One more odd moment is when Doc talks about traveling to the birth of Christ using the time circuits. Besides the year mistake, there's no way the DeLorean could get from California to the Middle East, no matter how fast it goes. But it's not just the writing that had issues. Some of the visual effects and props also gave away more than the filmmakers intended, revealing mistakes you can actually catch. In the mall parking lot scene, when Marty is being chased by the terrorists, the camera shows the DeLorean from a distance. What fans may not realize is that it's Eric Stoltz driving the car in that moment. These were filmed before Michael J. Fox was cast. Since the shots were wide and you couldn't see the driver's face clearly, they kept the original scenes in the final cut. In another scene, Marty looks up Doc's address in a 1955 phone book, but the close-up of the hand flipping the page doesn't match. It's the hand of an older man with visible age spots, not a teenager's hand like Marty's. At the start of the movie, Doc uses a remote control to drive the DeLorean, but if you look closely, the battery meter shows 0 volts. That means the device is actually off. Still, Doc seems to be using it to control the car. Another mistake comes when Marty and Jennifer are rushing into school. Through the windows at the end of the hallway, you can clearly see that it's dark outside, but it's supposed to be early morning. In the third film, there's a moment when the DeLorean is about to catch the lightning bolt. The flux capacitor lights up before the car receives any electricity from the bolt. That blue glow is meant to show that time travel is about to happen. But technically, it starts too soon. These small moments don't ruin the film, but they are proof that even a hit movie like Back to the Future can't escape a few goofs. But if you look even deeper, some tiny background errors tell even more interesting stories. Background details that don't quite add up. At the beginning of the film, Biff is in the kitchen getting a beer. He complains that all George has is light beer, but if you look closely, you'll see 3 cans of Budweiser sitting on the shelf in the fridge door. That's not light beer at all. Another strange moment happens when Marty wakes up in his bed in 1985. Behind him is a yellow magazine called RQ. This stands for Reference Quarterly, which is a journal meant for librarians. In the DVD commentary, the producers admitted it was a mistake by the set dresser. A normal teenager like Marty wouldn't have that in his room. In another scene, Doc shows Marty the drawing of the flux capacitor, but the label on the drawing says flux compressor. That's not what it's called in the story, so the label is clearly wrong. There's also a scene where Marty chases after George after he leaves the diner, but by that point, Marty already has Doc's address and knows he needs help. There's no real reason for him to chase George. He doesn't have a strong emotional bond with him yet. It seems like he's only doing it because the plot needed him to. That's why some fans say the moment feels forced. Finally, Marty asks Doc if the car runs on gasoline. Doc says it needs something stronger, plutonium. But in Part 3, Doc says that plutonium powers the flux capacitor, and the car itself runs on regular gas. This creates confusion, especially for fans who watch all 3 movies closely. These small things might not bother casual viewers, but for fans who re-watch the trilogy again and again, they stand out. They remind us that even a time-traveling DeLorean can't travel far enough to fix every slip-up. Which scene from Back to the Future is your all-time favorite, and why? And did you ever notice any of these bloopers or mistakes before? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. 这是 next time.